You're listening to a classic business podcast as heard on Classic 1027. 1027.
Thanks to an innovative idea from the Replenish Africa initiative, RAIN and Nando's, a small village roughly 30 kilometers outside Maputo in Mozambique has been transformed through access to water and woman empowerment and woman leadership. James Duncan is the farm project manager on the ground in Mozambique, and he joins us now. James, good evening. The ingredients of this project involve Nando's Chillies, some Ellies, and a bit of innovation. How did it all begin?
Yes, good evening, Michael, and good evening to your listeners. Yes, I think that's a very, very good question. I think anybody that enjoys peri-peri chicken has probably at some point eaten at Nando's. And, you know, we know that secret ingredient is peri-peri. And I think that the founders heard about a project of a gentleman that was growing chili around farmers' crops to protect their crops from elephants damaging. And so that sort of sparked a conversation around, well, why not grow the Nando's African bird's eye chili, and that farmers using it to protect their crops would be able to get some sort of a financial reward for that. And that was sort of the catalyst to a Peri Farm project and how it's evolved into a very, very large scale growing project now for peri-peri with over 1,000 farmers in about 4 different regions in southern Africa.
I don't know how many people are actually aware of that farmers in Mozambique were using these chilies to protect their crops, because Ellies don't like chilies. I mean, that they seem pretty impervious to everything else if you watch them knock down trees in the Kruger Park or elsewhere. Now, the idea to then partner with the local community. I mean, who are all the partners on this project?
Well, I think the partners, I mean, they're all small-scale farmers. On a scale in terms of the driving force behind this is a division of Nando's called Peri Farms. And really this was about a desire to help change people's lives and bring an element of resilience by giving them a stable financial return on a crop that they grow, that they can depend on. And you know, the shareholders had a view that instead of growing peri-peri commercially, they would have an opportunity to help change people's lives, as Robbie Brosen says, one chili at a time. And so Nando's is the main sort of driver behind the Peri Farm project. But then, of course, there are other partners involved in terms of the spice processes, where the chili actually ends up. But we drive most of this in Mozambique with a series of farmers here, small-scale farmers. There is a project in Zimbabwe, there is a project in Malawi, and there's a smaller project in South Africa. But the idea is not to have it commercially grown, but to rather work with small-scale farmers. And here in Mozambique, we run a agricultural training academy that specifically focuses on Mozambican women. They go through an agri curriculum where we teach them how to grow a variety of crops, including peri-peri. And once they graduate, we award them with a growing contract so that they can then start growing and start earning an income. And basically we grow and we work with them to help them grow their crops and improve yield. You know, more yield, more money, fuller bellies, and better access to all the other things that we take for granted, you know.
Remarkable. I mean, just a great example of what could be done if one thinks strategically about procuring key inputs in the African context. How have you solved for water challenges? Because there is very little formal type water infrastructure in Mozambique.
Yes, I think that it is a major concern. We obviously, even the smallholders that we work with, there is some basic minimum requirements, and that's obviously access to water so that they can irrigate their crops. But I think that we work with smallholders that are within close proximity to water sources, and then we will help them with infrastructure to be able to pump that and irrigate their land through drip tape irrigation, and help them set up that infrastructure so that over time they're able to pay back that infrastructure through the harvest. So right now, essentially what we're aiming to do is, and we have already actually achieved this, is that we have the desire to make sure that every one of our small-scale farmers earn anywhere between 3 to 6 times more than the average GDP per capita. And this last season, we've achieved that. So it's a model that works. It's affordable for small-scale farmers if we do it carefully, if we do it gradually. And we make sure that they have a great level of access to the technical supervision that we give them. And also the inputs of fertilizer, all of that is given to them at cost, and they only have to start paying that back once they start harvesting. So, yeah, it's very sustainable, and it's very sort of boots on the ground.
Yeah, and so that kind of low-tech solution, I mean, often when we think of interventions, we think we've got to go high-tech, but something like a hand pump borehole, for example, I mean, that can be transformative, and it's low-tech in terms of installing and maintaining. Yeah,
no, you're absolutely right, Michael. I think that if we go back to the project here in Maraquin, and the water project, really this came about sort of when we took over the operations of the farm under Nando's management, and we noticed that there were several women sort of just collecting water for drinking from a natural spring. It was a natural spring. We saw them collecting water for drinking, for cooking, for bathing, and they were washing their clothing around the site. We would see children making several trips, carrying large container of water up a mess of a steep incline to their homes, and sometimes spending up to like 3 hours a day, and if they were doing that, the question really was, well, what are they aren't doing? And they're not being kids, they're not going to school, the women are spending so much time walking to the water source and doing sort of family chores. They could have been spending that time focusing on other sort of initiatives and other things that would help bring in some financial, some finance into their families. So, the project here was really sort of born out of passing these women every single day and wanting to, and being able to be in a position to help them. Once we sort of investigated the status of the spring water, we saw how contaminated it was by litter and insect larvae and livestock feces and Lord knows what else, Michael. Honestly, I shudder to think. So I think that also then we then sort of investigated further, and we learned that some of the ladies had been attacked because it's quite isolated, it's overgrown. And so while they were doing their laundry, they were quite vulnerable to this sort of stuff. So we started having conversations with Sergio Fernandez, who runs the Coca-Cola Beverage Africa division here in Mozambique. And we sort of highlighted the current conditions to him. And he immediately saw an opportunity to raise funding through Replenish Africa initiative. And after a few days, a proposal was submitted, and within a very short period of time, a fund was approved and the costs were approved. And so we started, to change the status quo by drilling 2 boreholes in Maraquin, in this little borough. It's a little town, a village, if you like, of Maraquin, called Samora Michel. And, when you said that the building a Rolls Royce, that was our initial idea of having this excessive water project with solar panels and electrical sort of facilities, and that was bringing a Rolls Royce to Africa when all we really needed was a Toyota. So with the money that we had, we were able to build 2 boreholes and 2 laundry areas so that the women could do their families' washing in safety with safety lighting, in well sort of visible areas. And yeah, it's exactly what you've just said. It's sometimes the most simple solutions are the ones that are going to benefit the people who need it the most.
And James, in terms of the reception by the community, what kind of transformation have you seen through the various iterations of this project so far?
I think it's been phenomenal. I think that the one of the things that Rain and the fund managers wanted to ensure happened was that there was a massive amount of involvement from the community, setting up a water committee entirely made up of women, training with the women around not just sanitation, hand washing, but sort of pre-COVID precautions or COVID precautions. There was this massive amount of knowledge transfer in how to maintain the pumps, the equipment that they needed, the tools, and they were incredible. I can't explain to you what it was like to see them every week coming for their training sessions, singing extremely involved and wanting to share some of their indigenous knowledge back to the lecturers. They were saying, well, we've brought something for you to learn. And they were incredible. They took the lead. They took initiative around how they were going to engage with the water pumps, who was responsible for what. And yeah, it was just incredible. And even now, as we drive around the towns, there's smiles, there's waving. It's an entirely different sort of feeling you get when you get through onto the farm.
Well, that to me is true empowerment and true transformation in Africa. And often we think it's got to happen through other means, and it really is through sometimes some very straightforward and seemingly simple interventions that you can have some of the biggest impacts. James, thanks so much for sharing a little bit more about how a few of Nando's chilies came together with some innovation and some hard work to develop a really fantastic, transformative and low-tech solution to some of Africa's most intractable problems.
Very much.
Thank you. James Duncan, Commercial Director at Nando's Perry Farm.